Tonight, the stunning moment jurors in the Sean Diddy Combs trial were shown photos of the infamous freak-offs. A blockbuster day of testimony with Diddy's ex, Cassie Ventura, back on the stand. Her accusations of rape and blackmail as the defense gets ready to cross-examine her. Newark Airport warning. The revelation from Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy that he changed his wife's flight so she would not fly into Newark as more delays pile up today. Fiery hearing on Capitol Hill. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. facing tough questions and why, when it comes to vaccines, he said not to take his advice. House of Horrors. A teenager allegedly held in this house for years, even locked in a dog cage. What police revealed about her alleged captors. Deadly documentary. A man's family says he was killed because he was featured in a Nat Geo film. NBC News has exclusive video of the man before his death, blaming the filmmakers for putting his life at risk. Chaos on the fairway, the SUV speeding across a golf course, the driver waving a knife, one golfer now in the ICU. What started it all? And driverless dangers, more than 1,000 autonomous Waymo cars recalled, the latest in a string of mishaps for these vehicles of the future. Plus, Starbucks workers going on strike across the country, protesting their new uniforms. Will it impact your next cup of coffee? Top Story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Ellison Barber in for Tom Llamas. Tonight, the blockbuster testimony from the key witness in the federal case against Sean Diddy Combs, Cassie Ventura, Diddy's former girlfriend for more than a decade, detailing how she endured years of violence and the blackmail tactics Diddy allegedly used to keep her quiet, threatening to release videos of sexual encounters called freak-offs. And we must warn you, some of the details are incredibly disturbing. Cassie taking the stand for a second day after hours of maintaining her composure. She eventually broke down, describing the moment she had to go to rehab and trauma therapy and how she wanted to end her own life. The R&B singer testifying that Diddy raped her near the end of their relationship and during one of their most violent fights, recalled the mogul stomping on her face. She also testified that she saw Combs abuse and threaten other people, including rapper Kid Cudi, who she had a brief relationship with. Cassie testifying that Combs threatened to, quote, blow up Kid Cudi's car. She eventually ended their relationship, she says, out of fear. She also disclosed for the very first time that she received $20 million in a civil lawsuit against Diddy, but tried to sell him the rights to a book she was writing for $30 million. These are the charges Diddy faces. Now it is up to the defense to cross-examine Cassie. What will be their strategy when questioning her to prove Diddy is not guilty of the crimes he faces? We'll break that down with our legal expert in just a moment. But first, we begin with NBC's Chloe Malas and that intense day inside the courtroom.
Tonight, Cassie Ventura describing a night in August 2018 when she went to dinner with Sean Diddy Combs after they'd broken up, seeking closure. She says when Combs brought her back to her apartment, he came in and raped me on the living room floor. I remember crying and saying no, adding it was fast. His eyes were black. He wasn't himself. Ventura breaking down on the stand as she described the emotional fallout of their tumultuous 11-year relationship, calling Combs abusive and controlling and describing a number of brutal physical assaults. The first, she says, was in 2007 or 2008 in a car. He hit me on the side of my head and I fell to the floor, she testified. I was shocked. I didn't understand why he was so angry. She said after another assault, she asked her mom to take photos of her injuries. And for the third day in a row, prosecutors showed the jury this video of Combs brutally beating Ventura at a hotel.
How important is all of this testimony on the domestic abuse?
The allegations of domestic abuse really help explain why she stayed. And so while maybe they don't have direct bearing, they kind of explain her state of mind.
She also testified that when Combs was angry with her, he threatened to release videos of their explicit encounters with escorts, which they called freak-offs. Ventura says she feared if the videos became public, it would ruin everything I worked for and make me look like a slut. Today, jurors were shown photos from freak-offs on their own individual screens, shielded from public view. Ventura said they had hundreds of freak-offs, which she says left her feeling emotionally empty and like I did a job, adding they led to infections and that she developed an addiction to opioids, which she used to numb her feelings. She says she ultimately went to rehab because she was spinning out and didn't want to be alive anymore. Combs' lawyers have called him a complicated man, acknowledging Combs has been violent in the past, but they say all sexual acts were consensual and he didn't engage in sex trafficking.
And Chloe Malas joins us now from outside that courthouse in downtown Manhattan. Chloe, this was another harrowing day of testimony. Cassie describing that alleged rape in graphic detail. How is the jury reacting to all of this in real time?
Ellison, some of them are taking notes. I mean, look, you have 12 jurors and 6 alternates, and not everyone is going to be as engaged as the others. But when they were showing the 7 pictures from those freak-offs to the jurors on their own private monitors, Adam Reese, who is one of our investigative producers, he noted that everyone was just glued to those screens and looking at it. And again, we don't know what was on them. We are not privy, the public or the press, to see that. And again, this whole trial is going to last about 8 weeks. And tomorrow is another pivotal day when Combs' defense team, they're going to have their opportunity to try and poke holes in what Cassie Ventura said in her 2 days on the witness stand, because cross-examination begins in the morning. Ellison?
NBC's Chloe Malas, thank you. There was a lot of new and disturbing evidence today in court. So to help us understand it, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Danny, a lot of emotional testimony, so let's go through some of it, because ultimately in this case, there are only a few charges that Diddy is facing. It's these: racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. When we think about Cassie's testimony, the allegations of rape, how does that factor into all of this?
Combs is not charged with rape, but some of Cassie's testimony is key to establishing elements. Let me give you just one example. She testified about things like coercion. Right there you see that sex trafficking requires as one of its elements coercion, and that may be, for example, the threat of exposing the sex tapes that Combs took of Cassie when she was engaged in these freak-offs. That's just one example.
Okay. Let's click ahead here, because the jury was also shown some images today, photos from a so-called freak-off. They were shown to the jury in a concealed form so that people couldn't see it in the gallery if they were in the room. It reportedly depicts scenes from these freak-offs. Cassie is shown in them with multiple other men. If you're a part of this jury, what are you taking from seeing these images?
Yes, this is very effective by the prosecution. They are not only going to describe the freak-offs, they're going to show them pictures. And they're very good. The government prosecutors are very good at taking this kind of compelling evidence and using it very effectively. Those jurors are not going to be able to unremember what they saw in those images. And it certainly doesn't paint Combs in a flattering light.
So the other thing that we saw happen today is there was the allegation made in Cassie's testimony that Diddy allegedly showed Cassie's freak-off videos while they were on a flight. She said she believed those were deleted. She said she had to arrange a freak-off soon after, and that ultimately she said she was worried that he would release them publicly. Is this evidence of blackmail? And again, when we're talking about the charges he faces, does this have something to do with proving those charges, or is this just the prosecution establishing a narrative and a pattern of behavior that they believe supports the charges here?
Yes, so for example, he's not charged with blackmail, but we go back to that element of coercion that is so critical to sex trafficking. And while I think the defense can fairly explore the idea of, hey, were you a willing participant? I know that sounds insensitive, but they have to explore that possibility. When you get into this kind of coercive activity, everyone's heard of revenge porn. Everyone knows the fear that she might have felt when Combs may have been threatening to expose these videos from the freak-off. So very effective use of evidence by the government there.
Okay, and then another big name that came up today was Kid Cudi. This is the rapper who Cassie had a relationship with. According to Cassie's testimony, Diddy allegedly threatened Cassie and Kid Cudi. Cassie says that Diddy attacked her and trashed a hotel room. And she also said Diddy told her Kid Cudi's car would be blown up. This one right here, we have to note that while Kid Cudi did file a police report saying that his car was set on fire in some form or fashion, Diddy was never officially linked to that. What does all of this do for the prosecution?
Well, the most key that you pointed out there is one of the predicate crimes of racketeering is arson. So I expect the government may be using this as evidence of one of the under-elements, the sub-elements of racketeering, which is, did he agree to commit these predicate crimes? And one of the listed predicate crimes is arson.
All right. NBC's Danny Savalos, thank you for helping us understand that. The other big story tonight, a brutal and surprising early heat wave is baking Texas right now with triple-digit temperatures as extreme weather stretches across the country, from deadly flooding in the Northeast to rare wildfires in the Midwest. NBC's Ryan Chandler is tracking it all.
Tonight, a dangerous dome of oppressive heat, scorching Texas ahead of schedule.
Heat can be extremely dangerous, especially if you don't prepare ahead of time.
At this Dallas EMS station, first responders are preparing for weather's most common killer.
We kind of keep an eye out for younger children, elderly adults.
We're used to the heat in Texas, just not this early. This is an unusual heat wave, giving many areas their first triple digits of the year. And it's not just in Texas.
This heat is just awful.
Dry heat fueling wildfires in Minnesota. More than 33,000 acres have burned.
It's just too hot, too dry, too much wind.
But as parts of the country bake, the East Coast is getting drenched. From D.C. to New York, some of the country's busiest airports are facing delays because of thunderstorms and rain. It follows major flooding in Virginia. Fire rescue teams said they believed they found the body of 12-year-old Jordan Sims, who was washed away in rushing water Tuesday.
Obviously, this is a very tragic situation.
In Maryland, flash flooding forced evacuations. Water rushing up to the second story of this elementary school. Children carried through the water, rescued on boats. Scientists say extreme deadly weather is becoming more common.
Both of these, extreme heat events and heavy downpours, are precisely the two kinds of extreme weather phenomena that are most clearly linked to climate change.
A link scientists warn could make major weather events more severe.
Just heartbreaking to think of that 12-year-old Jordan Sims and his family. Ryan Chandler joining us now from Dallas. Ryan, talk to us about what you were seeing on the ground there. What are the conditions like?
Well, Ellison, the high temperature across Texas today clocked 111 degrees. We were spared for most of that. Up here in North Texas, it's just about mid-90s, but still millions of Texans remain under extreme heat warnings, stretching from the border through San Antonio, now up to Austin. The National Weather Service and local first responders warning everybody under those warnings to exercise enhanced cautions as this heat dome lasts throughout the week. Allison?
NBC's Ryan Chandler, thank you. There's more dangerous weather on the way, so let's get right to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, Ryan mentioned the heat where he is, but I understand you are also watching for potential tornadoes.
Yeah, we're going to get into a very active weather pattern once again. May is our #1 month for tornadoes. It's been unusually quiet, but that's going to come to a screeching halt starting tomorrow and then especially next week. We're still watching flash flooding, by the way, in Virginia, eastern Virginia this time. Yesterday it was the mountains. Now it's down towards the coastal plain. Areas outside of Richmond here to the east, all the maroon counties, flash flood warnings. One in New Jersey, one in West Virginia. So we still have some water issues in the east. Tomorrow at this time, we expect to be tracking strong to severe thunderstorms through Wisconsin, over Lake Michigan, into Michigan, northern Indiana. We could even see a threat of strong tornadoes. We're mostly concerned with this hatched area through central Wisconsin, down to Madison. This will include the Milwaukee area too, and isolated strong storms for Chicago. The worst tornado threat, though, is definitely up to the north, isolated to the south. And then finally, we end this week with a severe wind damage threat. This is going to stretch from St. Louis right through the southern Ohio Valley. So, Ellison, be prepared. The next couple of days are going to be difficult for travel and, of course, the dangers of severe storms.
Bill Cairns, thank you. Weather conditions also causing delays at Newark International Airport. That is on top of recent disruptions due to staffing shortages, construction issues, and equipment outages. Today, the FAA meeting with airlines to cap flights at that major travel hub as the Department of Transportation asks Congress for billions of dollars to overhaul the country's air traffic control system. NBC's Tom Costello has more.
Amid volatile weather at Newark, a shortage of air traffic controllers and communication outages leading to hours-long delays. The airport is also down to just 2 runways, as runway 4 left is under construction, expected to reopen in mid-June.
We're working at lightning speed and pace to get this resolved in Newark.
DOT Secretary Duffy wants Congress to spend billions to overhaul the nation's ATC system as airlines are meeting with the FAA about voluntarily cutting flights into Newark. Already, United has cut nearly 36 daily flights.
You're meeting with your competitors to trim down the Newark schedule. So all the different airlines that fly out of New York and out of Newark will be in Washington today, and we are going to work to figure out how, with the government, as a mediator, how to get the aircraft heading towards the runway consistent with the capabilities.
The airlines and the FAA insist Newark airspace remains safe, but Secretary Duffy acknowledges he'd recently changed his wife's flight to avoid Newark.
I did. I moved her from Newark to LaGuardia, not for safety, but because I needed her flight to fly. She had to get there.
Also today, the FAA set a hotline between controllers at Washington Reagan Airport and Pentagon helicopter controllers has been out of service for 3 years. In January, an Army chopper slammed into a passenger jet, killing 67 people. And on May 1st, another Army chopper deviated from its flight path, forcing 2 regional jets to abort their landings.
We became aware after that event. And now that we became aware of that event, we're insisting upon that line to be fixed before we resume any operations out of the Pentagon.
Tom Costello joins us now from Washington. So, Tom, the FAA was surprised the telecom line was down. How is that possible?
Yeah, I think that's the question, right? How is it possible that the FAA didn't know that the hotline between the Pentagon and the control tower at Reagan National was inoperative for 3 years? When they had a close call, of course, in May, that's what really tipped them off, that the hotline was down. But apparently they didn't recognize it even after the January midair crash that killed 67 people. The chopper flights around DCA right now have been suspended. The FAA was getting close to permanently banning those flights until the Pentagon announced they are going to suspend them until the investigation is complete.
Tom Costello, thank you. President Trump in the Middle East tonight, receiving an elaborate welcome in the country of Qatar. But the president is walking away with more than just an over-the-top welcome ceremony. Mr. Trump also there securing hundreds of billions of dollars of investments in the United States, all while facing new questions about that controversial Air Force One gift from that same country. NBC's Garrett Hake is with the president in Qatar.
Tonight, another lavish welcome for President Trump on his Mideast trip.
It's just a perfect evening.
This time in Qatar. Air Force One escorted by Qatari fighter jets, the Emir rolling out a literal red carpet. The president's motorcade met by an honor guard on camelback. And the dramatic visuals again giving way to deal-making. The White House touting $243 billion in new Qatari investment in the U.S., headlined by a $96 billion deal to purchase as many as 210 Boeing jets.
It's the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing. That's pretty good.
Trump is the first president to visit Qatar in more than 2 decades, which is home to America's largest Middle Eastern military base, but has also drawn criticism, including from the president, over its close ties with Hamas.
The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level.
And the president facing more Republican blowback over his plan to accept a $400 million luxury jet from Qatar, gifted to the Pentagon to serve as a temporary Air Force One, amid Boeing's ongoing delays delivering a replacement.
How do you know something's not implanted and it doesn't blow it up? So obviously there's a security concern there.
I can think of a lot of other things Qatar could do for us, like, for example, quit harboring Islamic jihadist terrorists who are trying to kill Americans.
Overnight, the president defending his decision on the deal, which has not yet been finalized.
With the United States of America, I believe that we should have the most impressive plan. Now, some people say, oh, you shouldn't accept gifts for the country. My attitude is, why wouldn't I accept a gift? We're giving to everybody else. Why wouldn't I accept a gift? Because it's going to be a couple of years, I think, before the Boeings are finished.
And this morning, President Trump meeting briefly with the new Syrian president, a former al-Qaeda member who broke with the group and once had a $10 million U.S. bounty on his head before deposing dictator Bashar al-Assad. Trump lifting U.S. sanctions on the new Syrian government at the request of Saudi Arabia and Turkey.
He's got the potential. He's a real leader. And, he led a charge, and he's pretty amazing.
Garrett Haake joins us now from Doha, Qatar. And Garrett, the president had talked about possibly joining peace talks between Ukraine and Russia in Turkey. I understand there's an update on that tonight.
That's right, Ellison. The Kremlin has just announced their delegation for those talks in Turkey, and it does not have the kind of senior officials you would expect if a deal was close. No Sergei Lavrov and no Vladimir Putin. Now, the Trump White House has not responded to this delegation yet, but if Putin isn't going, it seems highly unlikely President Trump would call off his planned trip to Abu Dhabi tomorrow and go to Turkey instead. Ellison?
Garrett Haake, thank you. We are back in a moment with On the Brink of Freedom. The Menendez brothers, one step closer now to being released. How they plan to convince a parole board they've served enough time. Plus, TikTok challenge arrest. The students setting their laptops on fire for views on social media. Why police are now arresting them. And the Starbucks revolt over new uniforms. Workers across the country going on strike, refusing to wear the new clothes. There's a new look at Starbucks, and a lot of baristas are not happy about it. The company enforcing a new dress code for its workers, which began on Monday. Now more than 1,000 employees are on strike in protest. NBC News correspondent Adrian Broaddus has the details.
No contract, no coffee.
Tonight, outrage brewing at nearly 75 Starbucks across the country. Baristas are walking out.
We are currently on an unfair labor practice strike and have walked out here today because of the newly implemented dress code that is now being enforced upon our stores illegally.
Monday marked the start of new rules on what baristas are allowed to wear under those famous green aprons. The company requiring workers to wear plain black T-shirts and khaki, black, or blue denim bottoms. Under the old dress code, workers were allowed to wear other dark colors and shirts with a pattern.
Have you ever tried this one?
Starbucks Workers United, the union representing workers at 570 of Starbucks' 10,000 company-owned U.S. stores, says the dress code should be subject to collective bargaining.
It's not just our right, but our duty to rebel.
They filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board over the company's alleged failure to bargain.
Finding out last minute that you need to go out and purchase a brand new dress code that you can't afford, it's completely out of touch. Most of us are paycheck to paycheck. We can't afford to go out and buy new shoes, new pants, and new shirts. We need a livable wage. Talks were going great, and now they're not. And Starbucks just continues to make changes that have nothing to do with our working conditions.
In a statement to NBC News, Starbucks said, quote, it would be more productive if the union would put the same effort into coming back to the table that they're putting into protesting wearing black shirts to work. The company also said the strike is having a limited impact on their stores, saying 99% of the stores have been open all week.
And Adrian Broaddus joins us now with more. So, Adrian, things have been contentious between the union and Starbucks for quite some time now. Where do negotiations currently stand?
They certainly have, Ellison. Starbucks rep says in the last year, specifically since April, they've had about 9 bargaining sessions over 20 days. That rep also telling NBC News they've reached at least 30 meaningful agreements that union reps said were important. Now, Starbucks says it remains committed to bargaining in good faith, and I'm paraphrasing here. They say they hope to, quote, reach a framework for single-store contracts. By contrast, the union rep who you heard from in the story says the union is still waiting for Starbucks to return to the bargaining table.
Adrian Broaddus, thank you. When we return in just a moment, an NBC News exclusive, you'll hear from the man whose family says he was killed because of his appearance in a documentary, warning that the film had put his life in danger. Dangerous drive on the golf course, the out-of-control SUV tearing across the fairway, how he was finally stopped. Welcome back. We begin Top Stories news feed with a disturbing story out of New Jersey. An 18-year-old escaping a home where she says she was held captive in a dog cage. chained in a bathroom and sexually abused. Her mother, Brenda Spencer, and stepfather, Brandon Mosley, arrested and now facing multiple charges, including kidnapping and child neglect. Mosley is also charged with 2 counts of sexual assault. They are due back in court on Friday, where prosecutors are expected to release more details about their alleged crimes. A driver is facing criminal charges after driving an SUV onto a Chicago golf course and hitting a golfer. Video shows the SUV racing over the fairway at Billy Caldwell Golf Course north of the city. The driver was reportedly waving a knife out of the window. The other cars you see there, or the other car rather, that is the general manager of the course trying to catch and stop that SUV. A 70-year-old golfer was hit and remains in the ICU tonight. And in Connecticut, 2 teens arrested for setting their laptops on fire. The students at Southington High School allegedly stuck objects into a Chromebook last Wednesday, causing it to catch fire and prompting the school to evacuate. The teens charged with reckless endangerment and criminal mischief. Police say this might be connected to the so-called Chromebook challenge. It's a TikTok trend we've reported on in the past, where people put things like paper clips and pencil lead in USB ports to try and set school Chromebooks on fire. Those teens are due in court tomorrow. Finally, a bizarre break-in at a home in LA. The homeowner says he returned Saturday night to find his whole house ransacked and a naked stranger sleeping in his bed. Before falling asleep, that intruder allegedly eating entire boxes of ice cream sandwiches and Beyond Burgers. That's not all. The homeowner says his unwelcome guest also chewed up an entire pack of gum and then left the softball-sized wad. He's also accused of clogging a toilet with towels and killing a possum in the backyard with a statue. Police arresting that intruder, but not releasing his identity. We turn now to the fireworks on Capitol Hill. 2 cabinet secretaries facing tough questions, including Democrats pressing Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem about President Trump's deportation efforts. NBC's Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has the latest.
Tonight, Georgetown postdoctoral fellow Badr Khansouri released from ICE detention.
There was no charge, there was nothing. They made a subhuman out of me.
DHS accused Khansouri, an Indian citizen here on a student visa, of promoting anti-Semitism on social media and having close connections to a senior advisor to Hamas, which he denies. The judge ruling his freedom of speech and due process rights were violated. This as DHS Secretary Kristi Noem was pressed by Democrats about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, removed to an El Salvador prison and accused of being a gang member, which he denies.
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents. To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process, and that's under the Constitution.
And she was asked about suspending habeas corpus, which allows people to challenge their detention.
So do you think it falls under the constitutional guidelines that I just read to you?
I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I believe it does. And this is the president's prerogative to pursue, and he has not indicated to me that he will or will not be taking that action.
While in another hearing, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. pressed on the jump in measles cases and his vaccine skepticism.
If you had a child today, would you vaccinate that child for measles?
For measles, probably for measles, but I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me.
Ryan Nobles joins us now from Capitol Hill. Ryan, we're hearing the FBI is instructing their field offices to shift their focus. What more do we know?
Yeah, that's right, Ellison. We're told that the FBI main office here in Washington, D.C. has instructed the officers in their field office to be shifting their focus away from white-collar crime, which is what the FBI is really known for, their primary focus, and turn their attention to immigration enforcement, which is, of course, a big priority for Donald Trump. This is an indication of where the resources will be spent and the type of work the FBI is going to do, but it is no doubt a big difference in what their traditional mission has been over the course of the agency's long history. Ellison?
Ryan Nobles on the Hill, thank you. Next tonight, the Menendez brothers closer to freedom than they have ever been in decades, at least, after a California judge resentenced the siblings late last night, making them eligible for parole. The brothers, who have served 30 years in prison for the murder of their parents, will now face a parole board, which will ultimately decide if the men are suitable to be released, a process that will be reviewed by California Governor Gavin Newsom. Joining us now is Ana Maria Baralt, the cousin of Eric and Lyle Menendez, who has been a staunch supporter of the brothers and was the first to testify in their resentencing hearing. Ana Maria, thank you for joining Top Story tonight. Talk to us about how you're feeling. How are you feeling? Have you been able to speak with your cousins yet? And if so, how are they doing?
Thank you for having me so much. I have been able to speak with my cousins, and they are very happy with this outcome. We all are very happy with this outcome. I think they're very aware, as are we, that this is bigger than just them. This was a really monumental case in the state of California. So we look forward to the parole board process, which is coming up soon.
Ana Maria, I want to show parts of the statements that were made by Eric and Lyle in court yesterday. Lyle saying, quote, "I was scared, but I was also filled with rage. 35 years later, I am deeply ashamed of who I was." And then Eric saying this, quote, "I stole from my parents the right to a full life. I lied to police, lied to my family. I am truly sorry." What did it feel like for you to hear your cousins publicly speak like that and publicly speak about how they feel so many years later?
You know, it was vindicating, because for the past few months we have been listening to the district attorney accuse them of having no insight, of not having recognized the scope of their crimes, when in fact they had, and they had to us many, many times. Those words were very powerful in the courtroom, but they were not the first time that I have heard them take full ownership and accountability for their actions. I am very happy that the rest of the world got to hear those words.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about the DA, because we had DA Hochman on yesterday saying that in his view, the brothers needed to admit to a lot more. Obviously, since then, this statement, we were made aware of these statements, right? Do you feel like that argument that we've heard from the DA again and again, that they haven't fully taken responsibility for the lies and different things that happened that night, do you feel like that should be put to rest now?
I can't imagine how it wouldn't be. I can't imagine how you could have either heard or read those words from Lyle and Eric and think that they hadn't completely taken responsibility for their actions. Clearly they have.
What comes next from your perspective for the brothers? Obviously, the parole board, all of those steps, but kind of in the immediate future, when you spoke to them, what were they saying the coming days are going to be like for them, or their plans?
The next coming days are really focused around the parole process. That is a very in-depth process where it's a little bit confusing, because the parole hearing that we have on June 13th, that was already set in motion by Governor Newsom. That was part of the clemency track, not necessarily part of the resentencing track. So I'm not 100% sure how those puzzle pieces are going to fit together, because they are slightly different. Parole hearing for the purpose of clemency versus sentencing. Parole. So we'll just have to see how that shakes out.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a little more about California Governor Gavin Newsom, because he will ultimately get the final say at the chance for freedom here for your cousins. I want to play some of what he had to say when he was asked and get your reaction on the other side. Let's listen.
So on the basis of a recommendation, I reject the parole board's recommendations often. It's conceivable, to the point, that on June 13th, there could be a recommendation to me. I'm the ultimate arbiter. It's also conceivable that will happen months and months later.
What would be your message to the governor tonight?
My message for the governor is, it's always first a heartfelt thank you, because he did initiate this process when in fact he didn't have to. So I am grateful that he has taken that step forward. I hope that he will read those statements that were issued from Lyle and Eric. I hope that he will take a good examination of the rehabilitation, and certainly take into consideration the Board of Parole and their findings as well. I don't think that anyone could make an argument that they are dangerous in any way, and I know that that is a big component of the clemency process. So to Governor Newsom, thank you for what you have done so far, and I hope that we will take it even further.
If I can, I want to ask you to imagine a scenario maybe a couple of months from now. I know sometimes when you're in the heart of legal cases, it's hard to look ahead of the immediate important steps in front of you. But if the best case scenario in your family's view happens for Eric and Lyle and they are released from prison, what would life look like for them? And for you, what would that moment of release mean?
For me, it would just mean everything. To see Lyle and Eric hug my mother, who has stage 4 cancer, that would be more than, I can't really put words into how much that would mean to me. I look forward to watching them. They understand the power of their voices within the field of bringing attention to survivors of sexual abuse, to childhood trauma. They understand that they have a very powerful message for the world. So I look forward to them getting it out there and making a difference.
All right. Anna Maria Barat, thank you for joining us tonight and for sharing some of your story and insights on all of this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Next to an NBC News investigation, the widow of a man killed by the Taliban tonight suing the makers of a documentary alleging that they failed to protect his life by prominently featuring him in a film about the final months of America's war in Afghanistan. Our team obtaining footage of an interview with that man just before he died, recounting the horrors he says he experienced. A warning, the details in this report are disturbing. Tonight, the widow of an Afghan man is suing National Geographic over one of its Emmy Award-winning documentaries, alleging her husband, Omar Khan, was tortured and killed by the Taliban after his identity was revealed in the film, according to the widow's attorney.
He was tortured, beaten, left to die.
The 2022 documentary titled Retrograde follows the final chaotic months of America's 20-year war in Afghanistan and features Khan as he worked among a group of Afghan mine clearers. A wrongful death lawsuit filed in California Superior Court named several companies behind the film as defendants, including Disney, National Geographic, and Hulu. The lawsuit alleges military personnel warned defendants about safety concerns regarding the identities of individuals who had assisting U.S. operations appearing in the film. Despite these warnings, defendants did not take appropriate measures to protect the identities.
When the documentary was finished and cut, concerns were raised by Special Forces and former Special Forces personnel about the danger that those people would be in if the faces weren't blurred or something was done to protect their identity.
Khan's attorney says his client was seized by the Taliban and tortured for over 2 weeks after social media clips circulated in Afghanistan showing scenes from the film. We have blurred some of the faces in the video to protect their identities. Khan's wife says he died of his injuries in April 2023 at the age of 25. NBC News obtained exclusive footage of Khan being interviewed by a member of the 12-8 Foundation, a nonprofit which helps Afghans who worked with U.S. Special Forces. The video was recorded after he was tortured and left to die, but before he succumbed to his injuries. In it, Khan details the horror he experienced, saying he was drowned in water and beaten to the point his right lung was damaged, adding that the Taliban found him through the Retrograde movie and was still asking villagers and his family members about him.
It would have been so easy to avoid this. It would have been so easy, and Omar would be alive today. Just basic common sense.
The companies named in the lawsuit, as well as the film's director, did not return to NBC News' request for comment. A year ago, National Geographic told the Washington Post that it took down the film in, quote, an abundance of caution, adding, "We were devastated to learn of the death of one of those brave Afghans, and our heart goes out to his family."
I'm glad they took it down. I think they did the right thing at that point. Unfortunately, it was too little too late for Omar.
Last January, Thomas Kaza, the executive director of 12-8 Foundation, testified at a congressional hearing on the dangers of Taliban reprisals, telling Khan's story.
Nat Geo gave the Taliban a target package.
Kaza says there are still several Afghans whose faces were shown in the film and remain in danger in Afghanistan due to delays in a special visa program designed to help Afghans who worked with the U.S. military.
As the Retrograde became a hit in Hollywood, it became a hit list in Afghanistan.
And Khan's widow says she hopes this lawsuit could one day help her get to the United States and to start a new life. She says she also hopes it will protect others like her husband in the future. Staying abroad with top stories Global Watch, Israel striking Gaza in its latest round of deadly bombardments. According to local health authorities, at least 80 Palestinians, mostly women and children, were killed in airstrikes in the northern part of the region. Israeli military saying that it is trying to verify these reports. The latest attacks come as President Trump pushes for a new hostage release deal with Hamas. Shocking video capturing an apparent kidnapping attempt in Paris. You see people in masks try to pull a woman into the back of what appears to be a white van. She and her partner wrestling with the group when a nearby shopkeeper rushes in, fighting them off with a fire extinguisher. Those alleged kidnappers quickly fleeing the scene. Prosecutors in Paris have not yet revealed the identity of the two victims or their conditions. An investigation is ongoing. And Australian scientists making a stunning discovery, the oldest known fossil footprints of a reptile-like animal. That animal, estimated to be about 2.5 feet long, it resembles a modern-day monitor lizard. The markings were found on a sandstone slab in Melbourne. Scientists say the prints date back about 350 million years, suggesting animals made the permanent switch from ocean to land way earlier than previously thought. Up next on Top Story, the battle over same-sex marriage not over yet. The new efforts to overturn it, and our interview with the man whose victory at the Supreme Court made it the law of the land. Plus, robo-taxi recall, driverless cars getting into minor collisions, how the company is reprogramming them to try and keep passengers safe. This summer marks 10 years since same-sex marriage became legal across the United States. For many, the battle may seem over, but there's a new push in several states to overturn the historic Supreme Court ruling that made it all possible. NBC's Stephen Romo spoke exclusively with the man behind that landmark case about where he thinks things stand today.
Jim Obergefell, the man whose name is synonymous with marriage equality, now warning the win he fought so hard for is facing new threats.
Did you think 10 years on you'd still be answering questions about the same topic?
I certainly wasn't expecting to be talking about the threats to marriage equality, the potential for Obergefell to be overturned.
In June of 2015, it was the Supreme Court ruling on his landmark case, Obergefell v. Hodges, that gave same-sex couples the constitutional right to marry. But a decade later, he says that battle continues.
What would you say to them, someone who feels like it's safe, marriage equality is safe?
Abortion rights. For 49 years, people grew up with that right. And then with the proverbial stroke of a pen on that decision, that right was taken away. We have to learn from that.
Since the 2022 Dobbs decision revoked the constitutional right to abortion in the U.S., many, including Obergefell himself, have wondered if same-sex marriage may be overturned as well.
In his concurring opinion on Dobbs overturning Roe versus Wade, Clarence Thomas specifically called out Obergefell. We should not feel safe.
Over the last 6 months, Republican lawmakers in 10 states have introduced measures aimed at rolling back same-sex marriage rights.
A resolution to condemn the Supreme Court of the United States decision in Obergefell versus Hodges.
Restore marriage to a union between one man and one woman.
To reverse Obergefell versus Hodges decision.
What this resolution does is it rejects the Obergefell decision.
NBC News has reached out to the authors of these states' resolutions. They either declined an interview or did not respond. None of the resolutions have passed yet and are non-binding even if they do. But Mass Resistance, the anti-marriage equality group that has helped write many of the resolutions, says just keeping opposition to the Obergefell ruling in the public eye is a win for them. The group telling NBC News they think this should be left up to the states, and they question the constitutional grounds of the 5-4 ruling.
Marriage is a right, and it shouldn't be dependent on where you live to be able to enjoy that right. Why is queer marriage any different than interracial marriage or any other marriage?
Obergefell says he never set out to be the voice of this movement. He learned his partner, John Arthur, had a terminal ALS diagnosis. So in 2013, they decided to fly from their home state of Ohio to wed in Maryland, where same-sex marriage was legal. But realizing their marriage would not be recognized on Arthur's Ohio death certificate, Obergefell went to court.
I'm here today in front of our nation's highest court.
And won. A bittersweet celebration as Arthur died before the ruling.
You know, people stop me still and hug me. Often they start crying and they talk about what this decision, what marriage equality means to them personally or for someone they love.
Public opinion has shifted over the last decade. Now 69% of Americans support same-sex marriage. That had increased across parties, but dipped recently among Republicans to 46% now in favor. And just last year, Justice Samuel Alito wrote about what he called the danger of the Obergefell case, saying he worries Americans who do not hide their adherence to traditional religious beliefs about homosexual conduct will be labeled as bigots. Despite the continued back and forth, Obergefell says there's plenty to celebrate in the decades since that landmark ruling.
Where do you think we'll be in 5 years? Are you optimistic?
My husband, John, was a very optimistic person, and he certainly had an impact on me. So I do my best to stay optimistic. I have to accept and be confident in that and have hope that we will prevail.
Stephen Romo, NBC News.
And when we come back, the car of the future hitting a red light, the accidents prompting Waymo to recall 80% of its driverless cars as the company looks to expand to even more cities. Finally tonight, a voluntary recall on those self-driving cars. The company Waymo recalling 80% of its driverless vehicles following collisions with gates and other barriers on the roads. This as instances of the cars driving the wrong way and leaving drivers stranded remain under federal investigation. NBC's Steve Patterson has more.
Tonight, self-driving car company Waymo hitting the brakes, recalling more than 1,200 vehicles due to minor collisions involving chains, gates, and other gate-like roadway barriers across the country. Waymo, whose parent company is Alphabet, citing a software issue which was resolved in November 2024 as the root of the problem, and stating that none of the resulting crashes caused injury, and the vast majority of which were low speed. The company says the issue does not impact cars currently on the road.
Do you see this as a major setback for the company and for the industry?
I don't think this is a major step back for the company or for the industry. It just highlights this is the root cause of the scientific problem that has not really been resolved.
Waymo going the wrong way! Last year, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration launched an investigation into Waymo after reports of its robo-taxis exhibiting driving behavior that potentially violated traffic safety laws. Some instances caught on camera.
Why is this thing going in a circle? I'm getting dizzy.
A man stuck in a Waymo on his way to the airport in Scottsdale as it drove out of control in circles.
This car is just going in circles.
A low-speed crash into a telephone pole in Phoenix.
Oh, my God.
A robo-taxi turning into oncoming traffic in Tempe.
It's going the wrong way.
One swerving in and out of its lane, others driving into construction zones.
Sir, we cannot move. We're sorry.
And ignoring an officer's instruction to pull to the side.
We're not driving!
We reached out to the NHTSA, which confirmed the investigation is still open. Despite these incidents, Waymo reiterating their technology leads to safer roads. Waymo data showing their driverless cars reduced injury-causing collisions by 81% compared to expected human performance over 50 million miles.
I'm optimistic. My estimate is within the next 5 years, we should be able to overcome and fundamentally resolve these type of issues and then allow the companies to deploy in a large scale.
A Waymo spokesperson telling NBC News, we hold ourselves to a high safety standard, and our record of reducing injuries over tens of millions of fully autonomous miles driven shows our technology is making roads safer.
And Steve Patterson joins us now from Los Angeles. I mean, it's sort of wild, Steve, to see all of those moments put together because it feels like a lot. But this voluntary recall, this also feels like an incredibly significant setback in the world of driverless cars. Do we have any idea when these cars will be back on the road and maybe even in more cities across the country?
Yeah, so it's arguably a setback for Waymo, but the company says that they've fixed the issue and significantly decreased the likelihood of those types of incidents. As for the industry, the expert we spoke to, he remains hopeful. He again thinks it's very safe in the major cities where it already exists and expects a full-scale deployment in about 5 years across the country, which of course will be more difficult, but attainable alongside third-party safety testing and government oversight. Waymo, of course, launching in 2015, the rideshare service in 2020. It plans to expand to 4 more cities as early as next year.
Wow.
Allison?
NBC's Steve Patterson, thank you. And thank you at home for watching Top Story. I'm Ellison Barber in New York for Tom Llamas. Stay right there. More news is on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.